I was in a small local coin shop last week, the kind of place that smells like old paper and copper. The owner, a guy named Marcus, who's been trading bullion for 40 years, was doing something I'd never seen him do. He was turning customers away. Not because he was closing, but because he was actually scared of his own inventory. For years, Marcus had dismissed silver as the annoying little brother of gold, the poor man's metal that stayed stagnant when everything else took off. He used to have stacks of it just sitting in the back, gathering dust. But as I watched, a guy walked in with a briefcase, ready to pay a massive premium over the current $72 spot price. And Marcus didn't even blink. He just shook his head and said, "Come back in a month and you'll realize I just did you a favor by saying no." When I asked him what had changed, he didn't pull up a spreadsheet or a technical chart. He just pointed to a stack of letters from industrial suppliers, tech firms, and solar manufacturers, all of them begging for physical delivery. To Marcus, the numbers on the screen were now a total fiction. He told me, the banks think they're still in control of the price, but the factories are the ones calling the shots now.
That shift from silver being a neglected coin in a hobbyist pocket to a high-stakes industrial hostage is exactly what we're seeing at the tail end of 2025. The silver bullet has finally been fired, and it's ripping right through the traditional financial playbook. The old theory that bullion banks could suppress the price with paper contracts is colliding with a physical reality they can no longer ignore. We are witnessing the great reset of a market that has been held down for a generation. The question isn't just why silver hit $70, but why the world's most conductive metal is suddenly becoming its most explosive asset.
That story is, it's the perfect microcosm of everything we're about to get into. You've got the financial narrative just completely collapsing under the weight of, physical necessity.
Right.
We've seen this insane move, from $29 earlier this year to an intraday peak of $84 an ounce just now in late December. It's a truly parabolic rally.
It is. And to really get our heads around it, we have to unpack this systemic failure you mentioned, this idea of paper price suppression, and what happens when the physical inventory, the actual metal in places like COMEX and the LBMA just vanishes.
And it starts with that core breakdown. Let's call it the paper panic.
The paper panic, yeah. For decades, the price wasn't really set by a miner in Mexico or a factory in China. It was set by financial instruments, futures, derivatives, these massive paper positions.
Exactly. And your coin dealer, Marcus, he gets it. That screen price is becoming a fiction because the very infrastructure that held it down for so long is, it's imploding.
And just how close did we come to a total collapse of that paper market?
We were on the brink. The whole system, for years, it relied on this core assumption that only a tiny, tiny fraction of paper claims would ever ask for the actual metal.
Yeah.
We've been calling it the score reserve system.
A score reserve system. So it's like fractional reserve banking, but for a physical commodity.
That's the perfect analogy. You have this enormous inverted pyramid of theoretical claims built on a wafer-thin layer of actual physical silver.
And what's the ratio? How bad is the imbalance?
It's staggering. Globally, for every 1 ounce of real physical silver, you might have over a dozen paper claims stacked on top of it. Yeah. Look at the data from London. The floating physical supply there is estimated at maybe 140 million ounces.
Okay.
But the daily trading volumes, they routinely blow past 600 million ounces. And the total paper claims are thought to be over 2 billion ounces. It's a system built entirely on trust, not on metal.
That trust is now completely broken.
It's gone. And you can see that trust eroding in real time when you look at the vault data.
So what are the numbers telling us? What are we seeing in the big vaults like the LBMA?
The signs of scarcity are they're undeniable and they are accelerating. The LBMA vaults in London have seen their holdings drop by a shocking 50% since the peaks back in 2021.
50%?
50%. But the real canary in the coal mine, the real tell, is on the COMEX. It's the distinction between what they call eligible silver and registered silver.
Okay, break that down for us. That sounds like a critical difference.
It's everything. Eligible silver is basically any bar that meets COMEX standards and is sitting in their approved vaults, but it hasn't been specifically earmarked for delivery against a futures contract.
So it's in the building, but it's not technically for sale right now.
Exactly. Think of it like a safe full of cash. Registered silver, on the other hand, is the metal that has the key in the lock. It's available for immediate delivery to settle a contract. That's the liquidity pool.
And I'm guessing that pool is getting pretty shallow.
It's drying up. The whole system relies on this smooth flow of metal from the eligible category into the registered category when needed. But that flow has slowed to a trickle. When industrial buyers or big funds stop trusting the paper and demand the physical, they drain that registered stockpile. That's the liquidity crisis that drove silver past $80.
So the fact that registered as depleting tells you the people who need the metal are taking it and not bringing it back.
They're taking it and locking it away for good.
Which brings us to this really bizarre financial behavior we saw all through the back half of 2025. Backwardation. I mean, normally silver's in contango, right? The future price is higher to cover storage and insurance.
Right.
So what does it mean when that flips on its head?
Backwardation, where the spot price is higher than the futures price, is a huge red flag in a precious metals market. It screams immediate, desperate physical urgency. Silver's fundamentals don't just change overnight. This aggressive pricing suggests that, well, someone is cornering the market, or at least trying to corner the available supply for delivery right now.
So the banks and the big players who are short the metal, they're basically being forced to pay a massive premium to get their hands on future metal because they can't find any for today.
That's it exactly. This isn't just normal market noise. This is the financial expression of physical pain. It's what happens when a physical shortage bites.
And that pain really crystallized in October, didn't it? The event we're calling the Great Silver Squeeze of October 2025. That was the moment the dam finally broke.
It was the flashpoint. You had a confluence of factors all hitting at the exact same time. First, you had just record-breaking Diwali demand coming out of India. That's a huge physical drain on the market every year. But it hit simultaneously with the LBMA reporting those historically low vault numbers we just talked about. This 1-2 punch sent silver lease rates, the cost to just borrow the metal for short-term settlement, it sent them rocketing above 39%.
39%. I mean, for a financial institution, that's an existential cost. You can't operate like that.
It's catastrophic. It's a death sentence for a short position. When your borrowing costs go that high, you have no choice. You're forced into a massive short covering event. The banks, the entities that were short hundreds of millions of ounces, they had to buy back those contracts immediately, no matter the price, just to stop the bleeding.
And that feedback loop is what shattered the old 1980 high of $50.
It blew right through it. This wasn't some organic rise in price. This was a forced liquidation caused by a complete structural failure of the physical market.
And this is where the story gets almost conspiratorial. Because right as the market instability was peaking, the system itself just shut down.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that CME outage in late November.
That was a huge moment for market confidence, or what was left of it. The CME, the main futures exchange, went down for nearly 11 hours. The official reason was a data center cooling issue.
Right.
But the timing was suspect, to say the least. It happened just as silver futures were blowing through $57 an ounce, pushing hard towards 60. The market speculation was, immediate and intense.
That the shutdown was deliberate.
That it was a circuit breaker, yeah. That it was intended to shield some of the big commodity market makers who were just massively exposed on the short side as the price broke through all their defense levels.
So what does that do to the psychology of the market? If traders believe the exchange will literally pull the plug to protect the big shorts.
It confirms every fear you have. It tells every single physical buyer and long-term investor that the game is rigged. The system will protect its own when things get tough. And what that did was it just accelerated the flight out of paper contracts and into physical metal, which of course just made the liquidity crisis even worse.
It's incredible. And we can't really talk about this physical scramble without touching on the geopolitical pressures that really lit the fuse, right? It wasn't just investors hedging. It was actual companies, manufacturers suddenly panicking about their supply chains.
This is where trade policy became a direct high-velocity driver of the commodity price. In February of 2025, the U.S. administration hit Mexico. And we have to remember, Mexico is the world's #1 silver producer with a 25% tariff.
And they added a 10% universal baseline tariff on top of that.
They did. So if you're a U.S.-based solar manufacturer, overnight, you're looking at a 35% tax on the most critical raw material you need, which you were probably sourcing from just across the border.
It's an immediate, unavoidable cost.
It's a profound tax. It triggered this frantic, nonstop scramble for any and all domestic supply. Suddenly, foreign silver was prohibitively expensive, and any U.S.-held metal became priceless. It forced U.S. companies to bid up the price just to keep their assembly lines moving.
And when you talk about controlling domestic supply, you have to talk about the one player sitting at what we've called the Silver Gate, JPMorgan Chase. Their history here is, it's complicated.
It's absolutely essential to understand their role. You have to remember, they were fined nearly $1 billion back in 2020 for market manipulation, for things like spoofing, which is basically suppressing the price with huge fake sell orders.
So they were using the paper market to push the price down.
While at the same time, according to many analysts, they were using those artificially low prices to acquire a massive hoard of physical metal. They've been doing it for over a decade.
A strategy to use paper to get cheap physical.
That's the widespread interpretation, yes. And the results are just staggering. As of this month, December 2025, JPMorgan holds something like 196 million ounces of silver in the COMEX system. That's 43% of the entire inventory.
43%.
On top of that, they're the custodian for huge silver ETFs. They have tremendous control over the flow of both the physical and the paper markets.
So here's the billion-dollar question then. If they control that much metal, especially the eligible metal, why haven't they just flooded the market with it to crush this squeeze and, restore order?
That is the central unanswerable question. If their goal was just to support the financial system, you'd think they'd release that eligible metal into the registered pool. But they're not. They're acting like a strategic holder now.
Why?
A few reasons, I think. First, they bought that metal cheap. They have no incentive to sell it cheap now. Second, they're likely holding it as a strategic hedge against the global monetary crisis we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And third, releasing it might only be a temporary fix. It wouldn't solve the underlying structural deficit from industrial demand. They've pivoted. They've gone from being the price suppressor to being the strategic reservoir.
So the entire market stability now hinges on the decisions of a tiny number of players and whether they decide to let that eligible silver become deliverable registered silver.
Exactly. The paper system is failing precisely because abstract liquidity is giving way to the cold, hard certainty of physical ownership.
And that leads us perfectly into the second part of this. Because if the first part was about the failure of the paper system, the second part is about this irresistible, inelastic industrial demand that just can't be wished away. We're moving from the financial story to the industrial story, how silver became this hostage.
This is the critical shift. This is why this price move is so different from, say, the 1980 spike, which is purely speculative. Silver isn't just a monetary metal anymore. It is a strategic, critical mineral. Modern technology, both green and digital, simply cannot function without it.
And analysts call this the green inflation trap, which sounds like a contradiction. The green transition is supposed to save us money.
It's the moment when political promises slam headfirst into geological reality. The assumption that the green transition would be smoothly deflationary, that solar panel costs would just fall forever, well, it completely ignores the cost of digging things out of the ground. The cycle is profoundly inflationary. Mandates for more solar drive silver demand up, which spikes the silver price, which then increases the cost of the green transition itself.
A self-reinforcing feedback loop.
Completely, and it's a loop that policymakers just seem to have completely underestimated.
And the reason silver is at the center of this is just down to its unique physical properties, which haven't changed.
That's right. It's unrivaled. It's the world's best conductor of both electricity and heat. And maybe more importantly, its resistance to corrosion is non-negotiable for modern infrastructure. You need your solar panels to last 25 years. You need your EV battery systems to be resilient. You need your data center contacts to not degrade. You can't substitute for perfection in these applications.
Let's zoom in on the biggest consumer of all, solar. The whole story seems to hinge on this one acronym, TOPCon, tunnel oxide passivated contact. You called it the solar silver vampire.
That's what it is. It's highly technical, but TOPCon is now the single most important driver of the physical silver market for the next decade. For years, the industry standard was a technology called PRC. PRC was good, but it hit its efficiency ceiling. To meet these aggressive government mandates, manufacturers had to pivot to the next generation, which is N-type TOPCon, and another called SHJ.
So what makes TOPCon better, and what's the cost in terms of silver?
It's more efficient because this special tunnel oxide layer, it just makes the solar cell better at converting sunlight into electricity, and it degrades less over time. It's the savior of the industry's efficiency roadmap. But here's the catch. To collect all that extra electricity, the designs are now bifacial. They absorb light from the front and the back. And to manage that current, you need silver paste contacts on both sides of the wafer.
So it's a simple physics problem. More efficiency means you need more contacts, which means you need more silver.
Bingo. Because of this new structure, the industry has locked itself into a technology, and TOPCon is set to be 70% of the market by 2026. That requires a 50% increase in silver loading per panel.
50% more silver for the exact same unit for one solar panel. That is a structural commitment to scarcity. I mean, they've invested billions in these new TFP-con production lines. They can't just go back.
They are locked in. They are structurally committed to a technology that consumes silver at a rate that geological reality simply cannot support. This isn't a gradual increase in demand. It's a massive, immediate step change in consumption for every single panel they produce.
Let's put some numbers on that. What does that mean for total consumption?
The math is it's staggering. In 2024, solar consumed over 200 million ounces. As TP&Con takes over, that baseline automatically ratchets up. Then you add in the exponential growth in installations. We're looking at a scenario where solar alone could consume between 300 and maybe even 400 million ounces of silver per year by the end of this decade.
And when you consider the total global mine supply is stuck at around 800 million ounces, you're saying one single industry could soon be eating up half of all newly mined silver every single year.
Half. For a procurement manager, that level of dependency is terrifying. It's an existential crisis.
And there's no easy substitute, right?
Yeah.
People always say, what about copper?
The substitution roadblock is severe. Copper corrodes. It corrodes quickly when it's exposed to the humidity and elements inside a solar panel. That risks reliability. It shortens the panel's lifespan, and it makes it almost impossible for banks to finance these massive 25-year projects. For the next 5 to 10 years, silver is the only game in town.
Okay, so beyond green energy, silver is also fundamental to the digital revolution, specifically AI and data centers. Another area where demand is just non-negotiable.
Data centers are the physical engines of the entire digital economy, and they need silver for that 24/7 uptime and efficiency. The growth has been absolutely breathtaking. Global IT power capacity grew something like 53 times between 2000 and 2025, from less than a gigawatt to almost 50 gigawatts.
Wow.
That massive increase in power means an exponential increase in hardware, in circuits, in cooling systems, all of which rely on silver-rich components.
And AI specifically has these very demanding hardware needs that only silver can really meet.
Absolutely. Training these large language models requires specialized hardware, GPUs, NPUs. These things run incredibly hot and fast. They rely on silver in their internal connections and their thermal packaging systems. Silver's conductivity is vital for two reasons: minimizing power loss and preventing catastrophic overheating. You substitute that, you compromise the performance of a multi-billion-dollar AI operation. It's unthinkable.
And this is another area where government policy is just pouring gasoline on the fire.
It's practically guaranteed demand. Governments around the world, the US, the UK, China, have all designated data centers as critical infrastructure. That streamlines permitting, it guarantees investment. The US executive order in January 2025, China's program to allow foreign ownership, these things guarantee massive, sustained investment in building out this silver-rich infrastructure. Industrial demand overall hit a record 680 million ounces in 2024, and this is why.
And the third leg of this technological stool is the electrification of cars. EVs need way more silver than an old gas guzzler.
It's another huge structural shift. A battery electric vehicle, or BEV, uses somewhere between 67 and 79% more silver than a standard internal combustion engine car. It's in the high voltage relays, the battery disconnects, the complex wire harnesses, all the electronic control units for safety features. You need silver because these systems are managing huge electrical loads, and they absolutely cannot fail.
And this transition is happening very, very quickly.
It is. The forecasts show EVs overtaking traditional cars as the main source of automotive silver demand by 2027. That's just around the corner. By 2031, this one sector could demand 94 million ounces. And that's not even counting the charging infrastructure. The cables, stations, they all rely on silver-plated contacts to handle the power and dissipate heat without corroding.
It's a perfect storm. The green mandate, TOP-con solar, AI infrastructure, EV transition, they all funnel down to the silver as this central, indispensable resource.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the final part of the puzzle. The supply side is fixed, and the macroeconomy is screaming for a safe haven.
Exactly. This final segment is about the geological and monetary walls that guarantee this crisis can't be resolved easily or quickly. We have to start with geology. The supply side is just inelastic. The mining industry cannot respond to this price signal.
But why not? I mean, the price has exploded. The incentive is clearly there. Why can't miners just, dig faster?
The incentive is there, but the ability isn't. For one, the era of finding these high-grade, easy-to-access silver deposits is over. The average ore grade in a primary silver mine today is collapsing. We're talking 100 to 150 grams per ton.
And what was it historically?
10 times that. This means to get the same amount of silver, miners have to move, crush, and process 10 times as much rock. That requires a vast amount of energy, labor, and capital. It just fundamentally raises the floor price of production.
So even with silver at $70, the cost to get it out of the ground is skyrocketing right alongside it.
Precisely. And even if they found a massive world-class deposit tomorrow, you run into the timeline issue, the 15-year lag.
15 years to bring a mine online.
Yeah.
The solar industry needs this metal now.
It's approaching 15 years on average, from discovery through feasibility, permitting, financing, all the way to commercial production. The solar industry's crisis is for the 2026 to 2030 rollout of top econ. The mining industry can't possibly respond to that until well into the 2030s. This gap guarantees a period of extreme volatility and a perpetual structural deficit.
And the ultimate irony, or the cognitive dissonance, is that the environmental movement is fueling the shortage that threatens the entire green transition.
It's the great self-defeating mechanism of the green inflation trap. The ESG movement pushes hard for green energy adoption, which is great, but it simultaneously makes permitting new mines politically and legally almost impossible, especially in North America and Europe. The process is long, expensive, and full of legal challenges. The same forces demanding millions of solar panels are actively blocking the mining required to build them.
So we're subsidizing the demand side with tax breaks for green tech, while simultaneously legislating against the supply side with permitting laws.
That's the paradox in a nutshell. We have subsidized demand and regulated supply, and the result is this massive structural deficit. When you add it all up, we're facing a non-cyclical structural deficit of 300 to 400 million ounces per year. And that cumulative deficit just rapidly drains all the world's above-ground stockpiles.
And this is all happening against this backdrop of just unprecedented global monetary stress, which is making silver this potent Great Reset hedge.
That's the macro layer that just amplifies everything. This price explosion is really a flight from financial assets, from paper promises, to hard physical assets that don't rely on credit guarantees or political stability. And the driver is the global debt crisis. The U.S. national debt is over $37.8 trillion. And the critical number is that the annual interest payments are now over $1.2 trillion.
$1 trillion just to service the debt. And since austerity, cutting spending is politically impossible, what's the government's only real option?
Their only option is to inflate the debt away, to debase the currency and maintain negative real interest rates. That's a policy called financial repression.
So if inflation is higher than the interest you're earning on your bonds, your money is guaranteed to lose purchasing power.
Right. And that forces capital to flee those traditional assets. It forces a desperate search for something that will hold its value. This is the struggle for monetary pricing power in a deglobalizing world. And we're seeing central banks around the globe making this pivot.
How are other nations reacting to this?
They're diversifying. Emerging markets, China, Poland, they've been massively increasing their physical gold reserves, over 2,300 tons in the last 3 years. It's a strategic hedge against the debasement of the dollar and geopolitical risk that puts a high structural floor under all precious metals. Silver gets pulled up by that gold floor, but then it gets this massive industrial rocket strapped to its back.
And you can see that combination of monetary stability from gold and industrial scarcity in silver reflected in the gold-silver ratio, which has just collapsed.
Absolutely. The ratio, how many ounces of silver it takes to buy 1 ounce of gold, it used to be 60 or 80 to 1. By late 2025, it had collapsed to nearly 40 to 1. That is definitive proof that silver is decoupling from its old role as just gold's little brother. It's now being priced as a scarce, high-growth technology asset.
It's acting like a tech stock, but with the foundation of a hard monetary asset.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that brings us to the final crucial point about price. What is the actual marginal utility of silver to that industrial buyer? Because the market has to force the price to that level, and that pain threshold is much higher than people think.
Meaning, how high does the price have to go before a solar manufacturer says, that's it, we can't afford it, and demand destruction kicks in?
You have to look at the cost breakdown. Even at $100 an ounce, which is way above where we are now, silver adds only about $25 or $30 to the cost of a solar panel. For a multi-billion-dollar solar project, that is not a fatal cost. The utility of silver is keeping that billion-dollar business operational. That utility is worth far more than $75 an ounce.
The demand is inelastic. They have to pay whatever it takes to keep the lines running because the alternative is scrapping billions in new infrastructure.
Exactly. The market has to force the price to the level that the most desperate industrial buyer is willing to pay. And that level is defined by the catastrophic cost of not having the metal. The price is going to reflect that desperation.
So this price explosion is simply a reckoning. It's a massive wealth transfer driven by physical reality.
It is the reckoning. It's a wealth transfer from the financial institutions that believed in paper narratives to the miners and physical holders who understood the realities of top econ and AI. The price has to rise to force solutions, to force more recycling, to force the political conversation on permitting, and to force demand destruction in less essential areas like jewelry.
And the fact that the U.S. Geological Survey officially added silver to the critical minerals list just this month, that signals that governments now see it as a matter of national security.
That's the final structural floor under the price. Critical mineral status means potential government stockpiling. It means regulatory priority. The old theory of paper price suppression is officially dead. Silver's value isn't being written by speculators in London anymore. It's being written by the non-negotiable physical necessity of the green and digital revolutions. The conclusion here is binary. It's driven by physics. Either the laws of physics change and we find a way to make high-efficiency solar panels out of something cheaper, or the price of silver has to re-rate dramatically to reflect its status as a critical, scarce, strategic energy metal. The move to $100 isn't speculation. It's the mathematical cost of doing business in a top pecan and AI-driven world, given the geological scarcity and that 15-year lag to bring on new supply. When the music stops and industrial giants are scrambling for chairs to keep their production lines running, you don't want to be holding paper. You want to be holding the physical metal that powers the future.